This is Franchise Today, brought to you by FRM Solutions, providers of the best-in-class software solutions for franchise relationship management. Franchise Today is your destination for weekly information, conversations, and interviews with accomplished industry leaders, all of whom share best practices for sustainable growth and sensible franchising. Here now, your host, Stan Friedman, to kick off this week's podcast.
And I'm coming to you today from Atlanta, Georgia, and Champaign, Illinois. This is a special edition of Franchise Today. I'm Stan Friedman, proud to be presenting this first in a series of special podcasts focused on Franchising Gives Back. In 2015, Franchising Gives Back got its start when a concerned group of franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers all came together before the start of an IFA convention and organized a volunteer effort. As the IFA began hearing more about how franchise business leaders were supporting charities nationally and in their local communities, they decided it was time to do more to recognize those who consistently give back to move communities forward while inspiring their peers to do the same. Founded in 2015, the program operates under the IFA's Educational Foundation, and it's supported by the generous donations from IFA members and the underwriting of founding sponsor Rourke Capital. Steve Romanello, managing director of Rourke, said the core initiative of the program is to highlight franchising's charitable contributions. Franchising Gives Back recognizes and promotes the contributions of franchise business leaders year-round, from supporting Little League baseball teams and donating food for homeless shelters to organizing marches for cancer research. Franchise businesses donate billions of volunteer hours and dollars to give back to their communities, Romanello said. Big or small, the combined local contributions of franchising create a significant impact worldwide. The Franchising Gives Back program holds an annual awards dinner to honor brands for their charitable contributions. In 2015, the IFA Foundation received over 100 submissions from IFA members to be considered for the Franchising Gives Back Awards. Fast forward the tape to 2019, and the initiative's mission is to recognize and encourage charitable acts and exemplary leadership in the franchise community. So far, the response from the franchise community has been phenomenal. 629 members, 366,673 volunteers have donated $347,173,231 and $2,604,761 hours to giving back to the communities that they serve. When we come back from a short break, I'm going to introduce you to John Liautaud as he talks about a part of his life that few ever hear talked about, and that's caring for others and lifting up any and all that are in his orbit. He'll take us all the way back to his childhood days and walk us through the many years of doing well by doing good. We'll be right back for this special edition of Franchise Today with the iconic John Liautaud.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Hey, Stan Friedman here with a word about our newest sponsor. I'm talking about Transitive, an amazing marketing platform that actually delivers what others can only imagine: accurate, dependable results that are second to none. All right, without getting too deep into the weeds, Transitive connects franchisees' customer data from all sources, providing high-octane fuel for their marketing engines. They then deploy machine learning, yes, artificial intelligence, which identifies various customer traits and habits, attributes that would otherwise likely go unnoticed, and it segments these customers into groups. This is important because, as we know, not all customers provide your franchisees with equal dollar value. But wouldn't it be great if they could easily identify who's who? Well, that's exactly what Transitive does. And what's more, it then accurately drives the appropriate offers to each of those customer groups, delivering specific personalized messages to each of the group's customers. Just like that, your franchisees are engaged in laser-focused target marketing, delivering them much more bang for the buck. You've got to see it to believe it, so what are you waiting for? Order up a demo today and tell them I sent you. Find them online at www.transitive.io. That's www.transitive.io. This portion of Franchise Today is brought to you by Zoracle, providers of spot-on profiles, the gold standard of assessment tools that assure you're selecting the right franchisees every time. Unlike DISC or others that simply gauge personality or communication styles, Zoracle's spot-on assessments are all franchise-specific and based upon 7 sciences that nail the results each and every time. Your prospects simply answer a few questions online, and like magic, Zoracle's algorithms scientifically slice, dice, and analyze their thresholds for risk, their business acumen, and even their propensity for single or multi-unit ownership. Zoracle's spot-on analysis is like having a crystal ball, but there's no hoodoo here. It's all based upon science that flawlessly determines franchisor compatibility and accurately predicts performance. Why don't you schedule a demo today? Take a complimentary look and see for yourself. It's the closest thing to a sure thing. Zoracle, spot-on assessments based on science, but delivering results that seem simply magical. Check them out at www.zoracleprofiles.com. Today, I place the spotlight on a guy who has a tremendous nexus with Rourke Capital as the founder of a brand that Rourke has helped grow. Along with his wife, Leslie, for many years, they've been philanthropists extraordinaire. Jimmy John Liautaud returns to this special edition of Franchise Today for the second time in 2.5 years. Today, though, our discussion will be more about philanthropy than the recent news of the sale of his remaining shares to Inspire Brands. While interesting and topical, we'll save that conversation for a different day. Today's discussion is more about Jimmy John and his heart. What he gives, not what he's gotten. This is something that's not spoken about enough when we read and we hear about Jimmy John. But giving and improving the lives of others has always been a cornerstone of his philosophy. Something that I pulled off his personal website says it so well. I can't dance. I've got no rhythm. I can't read, but I'm good at math. And I've given lots of passion and energy. I use it all to help others. I love mentoring young entrepreneurs, students who are less fortunate than most, and my team. 14 out of 17 of my department heads came from the sandwich shop and are now millionaires. Boy, if that doesn't say it all, what does? Jimmy John, welcome back to Franchise Today.
Thank you very much, Stan. It's good to be here. That warmed my heart.
Well, I think it probably warmed the hearts of 14 of your executives as well, would you say?
I think that their spouses and their families and their communities and the local home builders and all the other people that benefited from that sharing for sure.
So, Jimmy, I wanted to spend the time today that we've got together to talk about giving and what it means and sharing. And, I think you've made some poignant analogies about spice means one thing to me and maybe another thing to others. But at the end of the day, it's still something that we all relate to as being hot. Philanthropy has been a big part of your life, and you've kind of been giving the whole way through. But when we hear about Jimmy John, we don't hear about that. Why don't you talk with the audience a little bit about what that means to Leslie and to you, and how it is that you do what you do to help others around you grow?
Sure. Stan, if it's okay with you, I'd like to just share with you my journey of getting into helping others way back in the day when I started, and then we can talk about the evolution of my life and where it's evolved now to where Leslie and I are doing things together. Back when I started Jimmy John's in Charleston, Illinois, there was a issue in Charleston that it had really bad water. And I noticed that when I opened my first store and I was interviewing people, that I would interview people and I would interview these wonderful people that had these horrendous teeth. And, I was a fat kid when I was little, and I was just bullied and teased and beat up on back when that was okay to do. And as I would interview these beautiful people, and they'd come interview with me and they wouldn't have jobs. And so I said, I really need some people. And this poor individual I'm interviewing is a wonderful individual, but has these rotten teeth. I said, listen, I'm going to hire you. And I would, in a safe way, bring up the teeth. I'd say, would you be open to me fixing your teeth and helping you with your smile? And I did it in a manner that was positive and reassuring. And I had a couple of wins way back in 1983 when I opened the first Jimmy John's. And so I'd give an individual a smile. My first one was an old woman by the name of Winola Grant. And I think she's passed away now. And it was a situation where, long story short, I did a total rebuild of her smile. And she went on to be she worked for me for like 7 years in Charleston, Illinois. And I said, boy, this is interesting how people get passed over because of how they look. And I needed people, and I needed good people, and because people get passed over because they're judged the way I was judged as a fat kid. I mean, back in the early days, and you go into a restaurant by yourself, and you're a fat guy, they put you back in the corner, upstairs. And if you walk into a restaurant and you're a beautiful person, they put you right in front and showcase you. That was my life. So long story short, my journey of helping people, I needed help at Jimmy John's as I started helping by fixing teeth. So move the ball forward. I opened up that first store in Charleston and replaced myself. And Winola was the manager there. And I moved out to Macomb, Illinois. And I opened up my second store at Western Illinois University. And I had a gal there by the name of Mary McCarty. And it was a similar situation. And I fixed her teeth. And she ended up running that store and then becoming an area manager for me. And then as my journey continued on, it was became part of my MO. I'd hire people, and they're wonderful people. And I started fixing things for them and doing things for them that they couldn't do for themselves. Whether it would be a tattoo in the wrong place, I'd fix that, or they would mutilate themselves with gauges in their ears when they were young and making decisions that weren't quite in the best interest of their long-term best self. And so I started repairing gauges, and I started doing things like this and helping people with their self-esteem. And so when I could take an individual and I could take these big, giant, quarter-size holes in their ear, and I could repair that mutilation, and I could line them up with the Jimmy John's training program and the journey at Jimmy John's, and provide them not only self-esteem, but an opportunity to grow as much as they wanted to grow. It was just sort of this natural, beautiful harmony that was not because I'm philanthropic or because I'm virtuous or because I give back, but because it was a winner-winner. It was a beautiful symbiotic harmony. So that became just part of my MO and how I lived my life. And then my mother, whose name is Grażyna Liautaud, was Grażyna Gudaitis. She was a Lithuanian refugee. And she came from Lithuania when she was about 10 years old. When Russia invaded Lithuania in the middle of the night, they were bombed out of their home. She spent 2 years on the run and ended up in a DP camp in Germany, and finally came to America, to Ellis Island, came to Chicago, to the Lithuanian community. She was about 13 or 14 years old, early 50s, when she finally got over here. She went to University of Illinois. My mother was homecoming queen at University of Illinois, met my father. They got married, and my father was an entrepreneur as well. My father was a book salesman, and then he became a plastic molder, and we went through a couple of bankruptcies back when I was a kid. And we came out of that back in 76 was my dad's last bankruptcy. And my dad said, I'm never going to have debt again. He had more success. And my mother said, I'm going to start bringing kids from Lithuania that have bone disorders. I don't know how she chose bone disorders, and bring them to Chicago and help them and repair these bone disorders. So she would go find kids that were specifically scoliosis, or the spine was grown, like an S, or total bone issues. And she had a relationship with Shriners Hospital in Chicago, and she would bring one of the parents and the child to Chicago. So they'd be 2 months, 6 months, 8 months, and she would put them up, and she would take care of their expenses and bills and fix these kids. And I noticed my mom was doing this, and I started to have some success in the mid-90s. And so I started, joining my mom and giving a few bucks for it. Well, pretty soon we said, these hotels are expensive. Let's buy a house where we could put these people up in a house in Lamont, in the Lithuanian neighborhood. So we bought a house in Lamont, Illinois, and we started bringing over 3 and 4 and 5, 6 kids from Lithuania and fixing their bones. And meanwhile, I'm still doing all the stuff at Jimmy John's, but this is my journey of philanthropy. I just want to set the stage. So we would bring these families over, and Dr. Lebicki at Shriners Hospital in Chicago, he was the lead surgeon, and he would all donate it, and we would take these children and transform them and change their lives, and then send them back to Lithuania. Well, that evolved, and then we said the president of Lithuania got elected. His name was Valdis Adamkus, and he was a Chicago guy that he was also a refugee, moved back to Lithuania. We actually helped him get elected with funding, and he was the guy that spearheaded Lithuania becoming part of the European Union. When Valdis Adamkus got elected, and my father and I were the largest contributors of that. And, by the way, just so that you all know, it was like $200,000. But once that happened and Lithuania really started to prosper, my mom said to me, Jimmy, why don't we go and help do a hospital in Lithuania, and let's modernize it, and we can see about getting donations in America. And my mom said, I need $300,000 to put in some German windows. I mean, there's literally, these windows had no seals between the openings and the windows. They needed good windows in the hospital. And so my first real big philanthropic issue was I did these windows in the hospital for my mother. And my mother, she arranged all the donations of equipment and all containers and containers of stuff. Then we basically transformed this entire hospital in Lithuania. And then we brought the doctors from Lithuania to Chicago and trained them in Chicago, and then brought them back to Lithuania. Then the doctor group from Chicago went to Lithuania, and they helped them all and made this whole thing just become this beautiful, self-sustaining thing. And that was, and I did that with my mother, and it was such a wonderful thing to do, and it was such a feel good, and we just did it because it was my mother's homeland. And so that was my experience with philanthropy back in the early 90s and before I met Leslie. I met Leslie in 1998. And then we move it fast forward into the journey of Jimmy John's and things that I did and this is unscripted. This is all on memory. And when I think about when we started franchising the business in 94, it was rather informal. And then we formalized our training center and our corporate offices in the early 2000s. And we were bringing in, people from all over the country into our 3-week Jimmy John's training program. And one thing that now was really for sure was that people's self-esteem is so sensitive. And when people are judged by a smile or a mutilation or a bad tooth or a scar or something like that, people are simply judged and they're put in a category of inferior. And not only do they feel that way because society makes them feel that way. I mean, look at what Hollywood, they still make fun of obese people, right? And they make fun of things that it's okay to make fun of. And you see these people, I have these kids coming into training that are trying to find a life, but they have one of these issues. So one thing that we did is we created an alliance with a doctor in Champaign by the name of Dr. Scott Anderson, whose office was about a block and a half from our Jimmy John's training center in Champaign, Illinois. And he always kept a chair for us at his office. And so when the new trainees would come to Champaign, Illinois, every Monday, a new class started, 50, 60, 70 people come in, we'd make them smile and happy. And one thing that we looked for was, is there anything that we can do to help these people while they're here that they can't do for themselves? And these are kids that work for other franchisees. They're not our employees. They're just, I want to help people with their self-esteem. So we would make them smile and then identify people that we might be able to assist, whether it be a plastic surgery, fix a gauge, or something with teeth and a smile. And we would pull them out of class, later on, a day or two later. And Kim Landry, who's our director of training, had incredible bedside manner. And she would approach them and say, you're a wonderful person. Would you be interested in having us help you with this issue? And I am telling you, Stan, I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of people that we did things for, where we would replace a tooth. I mean, literally, Dr. Anderson would literally, if training was 2 to 3 weeks long, he would literally rebuild an entire mouth in coordination with the different surgeons and the different people. He would rebuild an entire rack in 2 to 3 weeks' time. And they not only would they go home with a certificate in training, they go home with a new smile. And so that was just kind of the way I've done it, Stan. I just kind of, I knew how people feel. I know how people feel when they have issues where they're prejudged. And being an individual who's been prejudged my entire life, it is absolutely painful and hurtful. And you just go back and say, I guess I just kind of deserve to feel this way because society tells me, movie stars tell me I should feel awful about myself. And, I go back and I change these people's lives. And so, you know what? I just keep doing it. And that's really the basis of what I've done. I try to help people with self-esteem and self-confidence in any way that I can. And I've done it just because, just because. And so that's a little bit of my journey. And I'll let you now ask me, Stan, if you want to move it in whatever direction you want to move the conversation. And I appreciate you letting me talk for so long.
Jimmy, that's what this is all about, really. This is all about hearing your heart. And I don't think that your passion can be disguised or better spoken for by anything I might have said. I'm happy to have let you just continue on. I want to just share a quote with you that I heard that I think really, really speaks to you pretty well. Entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like most people won't, so that you can live the rest of your life like most people can't. Now, that's not just about selfish or about being able to do things because you can now, but it's also about the fact that part of those things that you want to do are the things that you've been sharing with the audience. It's not just about you going to bed at night knowing that you can buy another car or you could buy another house, but that you've made a change in the lives of others. And I think that's a part of you that we just don't hear enough about.
We don't boast about it, right? We don't talk about it, right? It's not what we do, I mean, we do it because it's the right thing.
I do know what you mean, but that's the character, though, of franchising. That's the beauty of people like you that have grown an organization in a business model that requires interdependency. It's not just about you. It's about the people that are on your team, and it's about the people that you serve, and you as a leader, part of yourself above and beyond the brand and the growth of the brand and the core business of the brand. It's about being a part of the lives of the people that are part of your life. And I think that's something that more people need to do more of. You've kind of, in the research I've done, Jimmy, I've kind of seen that you've gone into some segments in philanthropy. You've spoken about health and wellness here already, but I think you've got a passion too for education and for the military and for the arts. Why don't you talk about some of these places that you've helped make changes in the lives of those that have come into your path?
Well, we'll go ahead and start with education. I graduated last in my high school class, and there was a guy that helped me through high school by the name of Jim Lyons. They want to kick me out of my school. And he said, if you kick Jimmy out, I'm going to leave too. And they said, well, if we let him stay, then you got to take care of him. And you got to make sure that Jimmy doesn't get in trouble, and you got to watch over him. And Jim Lyons watched over me, and he got me through high school. And from that, I was dyslexic, and I didn't know I was dyslexic. And I have ADD, and I didn't know I had ADD. And I'm a smart guy, but I didn't know that because I was ADD and I was dyslexic, the teachers assumed that they knew that I was somewhat smart, but they also at the same time thought that maybe I was a bit of a smart ass because of my inability to comprehend. They're like, well, if Jimmy would just apply himself. Well, with dyslexia and ADD, I can read a book, but I can't comprehend the book. So long story short, with education, my first big give back in education was I gave $1 million to Elgin Academy, my high school, and they wanted to name it the Liautaud Upper School. And I said, there's no way you're naming it the Liautaud Upper School. You're naming it the Liautaud Lyons Upper School. And then I brought Jim Lyons to the school, and we broke the bottle, or we had the celebration. And that was that. I did that. At the same time, my father was interested in partnering with the University of Illinois. He wanted to give some to and named the University of Illinois Chicago campus the Liautaud Business School. So I partnered with my father also back in the early 2000s, and we together gave a significant amount of money. I think it doesn't matter what it was, multiple millions of dollars, and it's now the Liautaud Business School at UIC in Chicago. So I did that. That was important to my dad, and my dad was a wonderful guy, so I joined him in that journey. And then from then, as far as education goes, I can't tell you how many people that I've put through college, how many people I've put through private high school, how many people that I've just done it. But if I was to guess, I would say that between the ones that I've done on the side and the Horatio Alger Association, which I'm a member of, which is about providing education for kids that come from really, really tough families. I don't know, Stan, I've probably put 50 to 100 kids through college, and these are all situational. These are employees' kids or kids that I know or kids that I met at Horatio Alger, or these are just, I like to invest in people that are going to help themselves. I like to invest in situations where 99% of the money goes to the individual who's actually trying to help themselves, and not to a situation where it goes to administration and executives and all this other stuff. So I really, I'm a big believer in it. And Horatio Alger Association has been one of the greatest associations that I've become a part of, because it helps children that come from disadvantaged situations. And whether you're disadvantaged because you're obese or you're disadvantaged because you're poor, I mean, some of these, I met this gal, I remember at Horatio Alger Association, when she was 14 years old, she lost her parents. or her parent. She was the caregiver for her younger sister. Then she got pregnant, and this woman graduated at 17 years old from her high school, valedictorian of her class as a mother and raising her younger kid. If you can't help a person like this, if you don't think an individual like this is worth investing in, then I'm sorry.
What a great segue into the Folds of Honor and your commitment to the military and the families of those that have lost in service to our country. Why don't you speak a little bit about that, Jimmy?
Sure. Well, Folds of Honor, once again, Major Dan is such a winner. I partnered with Dan before Folds of Honor was as big as it is right now. And I met Major Dan, and he just knocked me off my feet. I'm a guy, I'm not educated in investing, but I've learned that I bet the jockey, not the horse. And Major Dan, when I met Major Dan, I said, this guy is my kind of guy. Dan is going to go on and he's going to do great things. And my father fought the Korean War. My big brother, Greg, drove an armored personnel carrier. My little brother, Robbie, was at Fort Ord. But, my family were big military servers. And so I had some military background. Major Dan was a winner. And I just really liked him, and he inspired me. And so I gave that $1 million to Major Dan for Folds of Honor, which was a critical point. And Dan had Budweiser. Anheuser-Busch was a big giver at the time, but it was good for Dan and it was good for us. And I did it because it felt right. But since then, as far as the military goes, all my contributions to the military stuff have been very much under the radar. I have tried every time I hear of a Navy SEAL or one of these special forces guys who've been killed, I've reached out and I have made significant donations. The last one was, there was one about a year and a half ago where one of our special forces was killed. And I actually sent $100,000 to the family and never heard from the woman. And it was an interesting situation. I had met up with a couple of Navy SEALs through different situations. And I had shared with them, I said, I sent $100,000 to the widow of this individual. Do you know her? They're like, yes, we do. We'll contact her. And so anyway, she contacted me. She said, I'm so sorry. I received it. I was overwhelmed. But long story short is I do private donations to families where they have been hurt or killed in the line of duty. And I just do that. And I do that on my own, and I do it without fanfare. And I do it because, gosh darn it, if we're not going to look after these people that are looking after us, who's going to look after them? And again, for me, it's just what I do. And I do it because I can do it. And I just love America. And I love the opportunity it provided myself, my mother. My father was a first Liautaud with an education. My dad's mixed race. And, he fought the Korean War and went to University of Illinois in the GI Bill. So America's a beautiful place. And it's just what I do. And I'm going to continue to do it quietly until I pass on. And so that's where that comes from.
What about the arts, Jimmy? I know that you and your wife both have a passion for the arts. And again, I think it goes back not just to big symphonies and to big orchestras and big events, but to what the arts do for our kids as well and for youth, which seems to be a big part of your heart space, is trying to help youth have a better start in life perhaps than you did. What about the arts?
Well, I really think that, first of all, my wife is a ballerina. And I met Leslie when she was 23 years old and I was 33, and we got married. She got pregnant when she was young. She had a 4-year-old son when I met her. She couldn't dance anymore. And then we had 2 children. But she was always, always, always into the arts. And so my wife, who then she evolved into becoming a writer, she started writing. She started writing books, and then she started writing plays. And one of her plays got picked up in Kansas City. And the play got put on stage, and it got notoriety in a small town in Kansas City. And that evolved into a play that she wrote and was produced in Chicago. And it was supposed to be a 3-month run. And it was called Southern Gothic. It was supposed to run for 3 months, early 2018. And it ended up running for a year and 11 months and just had its last show October 28th of this year in Chicago. And so my wife is big into the arts, and her show was wildly successful. She's now got a big time book deal, and her show Southern Gothic is in the process of being, I believe, going to Washington, D.C. and New York. So Leslie is totally opposite of me. So it started out, as far as my giving to the arts, it started out with a radio jock friend of mine in Chicago named Mancow Muller was good friends with Bob Ritchie, who's AKA Kid Rock. And before the economy started really turning around in downtown Detroit, Kid Rock had done a lot of philanthropic giving to Detroit. He did his brewery, he did his restaurant, he did just a ton of give back in his community. And they were doing a fundraiser with the Detroit Symphony to help rebuild the Opera House in Detroit. And so I had, we had made an extraordinary amount of money in the state of Michigan while Michigan was just struggling and in a really, really, really bad place. I had uber success with Jimmy John's. So it was an opportunity for me to give back into Detroit, and one thing led to another, and then whether it's a Champaign-Urbana Symphony or it's the Goodman Theaters or whatever else it is, I've just been a giver to the arts, and so at this point in time, Leslie and I don't have a strategic plan for the arts, but we will allocate a portion of it, and I'm just going to let Leslie do it in the arts, and then also at the same time, if I can extrapolate on it, I brought my children. We have a family meeting every year about a week before Christmas, and we talk about, we actually formally identify all the giving that we've done for the year. And then what we do is we get together with the kids, and I did it 2 years ago. I said, kids, I want you to come together and figure out for you what's important to you. And I'd like you kids to help us allocate money from our foundation to give to what's important to you. And then there's another cool project the kids wanted to do, which is a project in Illinois called the Farm Way. And we have a musician friend of ours by the name, the band is called Hello Dave, and the lead is Mike Heimbaugh. And Mike just loves taking horses and retired horses and letting them live. And so anyway, we made a significant donation to the Farmway in Illinois that enabled them to buy this farm, and they're just doing this wonderful thing. And I'm part of the Everglades Foundation down in Florida, which is involved in cleaning up the water. Unfortunately, with the sugar cane and how with technology, it's really eliminated the filter system that the Everglades provides Florida, and really, and that's what's causing the red tide, right? So we're trying to clean up the Everglades. We want the sugarcane farmers to be able to grow sugarcane, but we want to do it in a way that allows the Everglades to breathe and to filter the water, because we really got to get rid of this red tide, which is killing the reefs down in Florida. What else am I working on? What else are we doing? Camp Southern Ground. When you take a guy like Zach Brown, I mean, this guy is a guy, I met Zach 7 or 8 years ago. And he was, all of his group was in a van, and I watched them play in a little location. They had a van. I met this guy and became close to him. And he had this dream of his camp, and Zach had more success and more success. And this guy's a visionary. And his vision is, this guy's maybe one of the most powerful forces that I've ever met in my life. And I've watched him grow as a musician, and I've watched him become not only a superstar, but a megastar, and become intimate with him. And he had this dream of Camp Southern Ground. And I saw Camp Southern Ground when it was just a property with a bunch of bulldozers parked there. And so he started doing projects at Camp Southern Ground. And I said, I want to be part of this. This is like Major Dan. I'm going to bet the jockey, not the horse here. And if you could see what Zach Brown has done with Camp Southern Ground. It's one of our biggest charitable donations, multiple millions of dollars to Camp Southern Ground. But he is bringing kids from disadvantaged kids, but specifically with autism and that have issues with spectrum children. And he has taken these kids at this camp, and he is working on their diet and removing gluten and sugar from their diet and serving them and cleaning their bodies through a healthy nutrition program at Southern Ground, together with exercise and education, then working on them, whether it be swimming or doing different activities or obstacle courses or whatever it is. And he's taking these kids and he's changing their lives. So Camp Southern Ground is one where, it's been a 7-year commitment over there at Camp Southern Ground. And it's just one of those amazing things where this guy is taking people and changing their lives, and at his own, and then he's doing concerts and giving all the money on his own to Camp Southern Ground. This guy is so incredible. It's so wonderful to invest in a guy where when you invest, what he does with it, it's just exponential. It's not like investing in, in some charity where you never see it again. So anyway, that's just been incredibly soul filling. We've been doing medical stuff and helping kids for a long time, but we are significantly significantly invested in the Lurie Children's Hospital, MD Anderson Cancer, Mayo Clinic, the Pancreatic Cancer Network, and all that. Really, my father died of pancreatic cancer. So you know what? That was pretty natural thing to give to, Stan, was pancreatic cancer. You know, it's interesting as I sit here and talk to you, Stan, I just am realizing how much we've really done. And I really never, ever sat down and tried to think about it again.
You're amazing. You are so amazing. I'm going to ask you to do one thing more, Jimmy, and I'm going to ask you to do something that I ask my guests each week to do for the audience. The audience comes here as emerging franchisors. They come here as franchise executives, and they come here to get nuggets. They want to be able to go home having learned something from those who are already there. And Jimmy, what you've shared so much about what you've done. And really what I think the audience is going to remember is how you've made them feel, because your heart is so real. What do you say to this audience that hasn't yet adopted philanthropy or giving back as part of their mantra?
Sure. Well, I think that first of all, what's most important is that philanthropy, it has to feel natural. It's got to be natural and it's got to be genuine to you. And if it's genuine to you and if it feels right to you, you can start by doing small things. For the last, 5-7 years, I've done in Champaign, Illinois, I've taken every single sixth grader, put them on a bus with a T-shirt. We customize a T-shirt for the special outing. They go on a bus. The bus goes to Chicago, and we take them to the Shedd Aquarium or the Museum of Science and Industry or the Museum of Natural History, and we give them a box lunch for lunch, and we bring them back. And we don't require them to give the $5 or the $10 that typically somebody has to co-pay for a field trip. I mean, we started out just doing one class, and then Tina Gilman said to me, who runs my foundation, she said, why don't we just do the entire community and do all the schools in Champaign-Urbana, take all the kids? And I said, great, let's do it. And so you can start out by taking some kids on a field trip and taking inner city kids that would never, ever, get a Jimmy John's box lunch or a new T-shirt or ride a luxury coach to Chicago and see a museum and get a candy bar and come home. You don't have to be that extravagant. You can start out with whatever is natural. We took a high school here in Champaign, and every away football game, we did a box lunch for all the football players and all the cheerleaders and all the people that went to the away game. I mean, it's so simple. I mean, you can just do such little things that are just that are easy to do. And so if you do something that is comfortable for you, that makes you feel good, then that's wonderful. Then it becomes a win-win. The recipient feels it, you feel it. If you're a believer in God, in order to receive, you've got to give. And so maybe it becomes a bit of a self-serving proposition, but gosh, I'll tell you what, the more I give, the more I receive, Stan. And it's just the way it is. And you don't have to be a believer to know that the more you give, the more you receive. I remember there was the teacher needed some video equipment in Champaign. They needed, $10,000 to do some video equipment in Champaign. We just bought them the video equipment. Here you go. Here's your video equipment. So it's you can just start by doing what's natural. Do something for your community. It's something that I did. I struggled in school. And the teachers thought that I was a smart ass. And my dad was gone. He was an entrepreneur. He was working 100 hours a week. And my mother had 4 children, 11 months apart. She could barely hold on. And my parents didn't have relationships with my teachers. And I really wish my parents did. So what I did is I had relationships with my teachers. And every Christmas, I'd give them a really nice box of chocolate or a really good bucket of that great Garrett's popcorn from Chicago, the half caramel, half cheese. It's so delicious. If you haven't had it, you got to get online and order it or whatever. But I made a connection. And then about every month or so, I would deliver all the teachers at my kids' schools. I'd serve their whole break room, Jimmy John sandwiches. And if there were vegans, I made them special vegan sandwiches. And if there were, and I knew what people wanted, and I would do a whole spread for them. So I created relationships. Well, is that charitable? I don't know if it's charitable, but it's a nice thing to do for your community. And it's a nice thing to do. It's a nice little surprise. It's giving a little love. So my advice to you is find something that makes you feel good. Start out in a small way. If you give $10 or you give $100 or you give your time. I mean, the easiest thing in the world to do, for somebody that has money is to give money. But for you to give your time, or for you to coach somebody, or to be a mentor for a Horatio Alger Association kid, I've got 3 or 4 mentees right now with Horatio Alger where they have an issue or they have a problem. They email me and I'm back to them right away. So you can give back by mentoring somebody. You don't have to give back financially. You can help people without money. There's so many ways to do it. I mean, there's so many ways. We have a crisis nursery in Champaign, Illinois that helps mothers that are in a tough situation that have children. And it's just the most beautiful thing that we went in and we created a beautiful playroom for the children that we called Camp Jack Pine, because Camp Jack Pine is where, when I was a kid, that's where I went. And so I named this room Camp Jack Pine, and I bought toys and a bunch of stuff, and it's now this beautiful thing in Crisis Nursery that's like a shining light in the day of chaos of the women and children that go to Crisis Nursery. So, Stan, you asked me a question. I don't know the answer. Whether it was, I just said, you can do whatever you want to do. Humane Society. I mean, we built a bike trail. We helped finish building a bike trail in Champaign. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do, man. If it feels good and it rocks your world and it makes people smile and you dig making people smile, do it. And I really think people that are the best at hospitality get great joy out of making people smile and serving and making people happy. And so, that's just go find whatever rocks your world and just go do it. And because we need you. We need you. We need everybody to trust their heart in this world of accelerated news and iPhones and iPods. It's we need to keep it real and get back to our communities and do this stuff. And not because we're virtuous, but because people need help. And help is a beautiful thing. So you can give somebody a smile, give them a hug, buy them a sandwich, buy them a t-shirt, take them on a field trip. Or you can take it as far as naming a building or a business school or building a hospital or changing mutilated bodies or tattoos or Humane Society or whatever it is you want to do. There's so many wonderful ways to help and give and love. And we need more hugs.
Jimmy, you've defined for me what I call in 4 or 5 words, doing well by doing good. And I don't think there's anybody that I've ever met that makes that so much a part of their life, just living and breathing and doing what they do and making certain along the way that others that are in their sphere are benefiting as well. Jimmy, I can't thank you enough for being here today. I wonder if there's anything you'd like to share with the audience that I haven't asked you, or as a parting thought.
Gosh, well, first of all, thank you very much for letting me do this. This is the first time in my entire life that I've ever looked back on philanthropy and what myself and my family have given back.
Makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's beautiful. And I think when we add it up, I think it's in excess of $20 million that we've contributed back to the world. And, it feels good. And it's bigger than I thought. I didn't realize it because it's part of my life. It's part of my lifestyle. And it's the way I roll. So I would just say thank you very much for hearing the side of me that has never been heard. And thank you all you that are hearing me speak for seeing the side of me that for some reason doesn't get enough. And it felt really good to talk about Mr. Lyons. And when I think back about Zach, when I met him and all his guys in a van packed in there, and now they're, this mega band. And I think about Southern Ground with its big buildings and my mom's hospital flourishing. And it's just wonderful. This was more of a gift to me. So thank you very much, Stan.
Jimmy, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to hearing more about Horatio Alger and the other things that you allow yourself now to become more involved with as your time will enable you to do so. My audience thanks you, and I thank you for being here today. Remember, you can subscribe to Franchise Today at Blog Talk Radio. You can download us anywhere that you can find podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, at iTunes, and you can even ask Alexa to play the latest episode of Franchise Today, and she'll be more than happy to accommodate. Until the next time, I'm Stan Friedman, wishing you the best, the very best of all things franchising, and Franchise Today is out.
Franchise Today is a production of FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM tools to empower relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. No excuses, just solutions. Find them online at frmsolutions.com. Join Stan every Wednesday at noon Eastern for another live episode of Franchise Today. Or, as always, download episodes on demand at blogtalkradio.com or iTunes.